Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way is in Training. This is a podcast exploring how warriors should train and fight, as well as how they should live. We will talk about technique, but we'll also dive deep into fitness, mindset, and strategy. We will explore leadership and philosophy as well. So whether you are a young soldier, a veteran police officer, a responsible armed citizen, or simply someone looking for an authentic life, let's examine how the lessons of combat and preparation for it can help us fulfill our potential. Let's explore the way together and learn how the discipline of training can show us our true selves amidst the chaos of life.
Hey everybody, welcome back. In this week's episode, I've got Andy Prisco, who I got in contact with because of my good friend, Coach Tony Blauer, who we both know, and who's kind of recommended that he gets on my podcast and we talk about a few things. So I'm looking forward to the conversation because if nothing else, Tony is a Renaissance man. So I'm interested to see what rabbit holes this one takes us down, and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for coming on, Andy. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
First, Matt, let me just say what a delight it is to be here with you. And, while we were in the green room, it sounds like in as much as I love and cherish Tony, we also know some other mutual people. And I'm happy to know that with someone with your pedigree in both the armed services and the public safety context, would be even willing to have a guy like me on your show. So thank you very, very much. In the world of psychiatric care and services, which is really my career field, I spent a lot of time in residential treatment facilities, state hospitals, some jails and prisons, providing a method of crisis de-escalation training, formerly as a government employee, and then later after I left state service in a private training capacity. So along that journey, we came to understand in the Psychiatric Emergency Response Team program, of which I'm the founder in the Pacific Northwest, we came to understand that there were specific skills that can be attached to a de-escalation effort that can be trained and drilled just like any other complex psychomotor skill. I also have a long history as a firefighter EMT, and I'm sure, as you can kind of associate from your own career experience, being in high-risk situations, in our environment, it was when someone was violent or very angry, requires the ability to, if you're going to respond to that, to employ specific skill. And that has to be learned and trained. So along that journey, what became apparent to me is that there were people from other sectors, from the complex, anybody who was doing complex psychomotor skill training was of interest to me in the behavioral health domain, because it became clear that in order to train people to safely engage in high-risk circumstances, they need to be able to know how to do something, what to do, how to stop the bleed, how to create an airway, how to make a precision shot, at the bottom of the respiratory breath. How to do these things occurs in the learning environment. So that's what I do today. My company is focused on bringing extremely concrete, prescriptive learning exercises and drills to the art and science of verbal de-escalation and crisis de-escalation. And that's why Tony and I work together so frequently. What he has done in the psychomotor domain with physical intervention, we have done with verbal de-escalation and crisis intervention, where you're trying to avoid a use of force. And as a former cop, I'm sure you can recall countless instances of having to engage a person in the hope of avoiding some kind of use of force, and to render influence when someone was having a particularly bad day, whether that was due to a mental health crisis or the onboarding of some substances or a disability like intellectual or developmental disability. And cops, in my view, have been underappreciated in what they've been doing for years when it comes to crisis de-escalation and verbal de-escalation. And there's a lot that we in behavioral health have been able to learn from the public safety side, which we've incorporated in our training. But many people in behavioral health are public safety and law enforcement averse, and because of that, there isn't more sharing. But we've really moved the needle on that in the last 10 years. But I'm talking in general about the last 25. So,
A couple quick thoughts, if you don't mind. One is because I'm kind of a martial arts geek, not just in the sense of training, but in the sense of like reading about these things, studying up on the history. My hero when I was a kid was Musashi, which probably explains why it turned out so different than everybody else. But so everybody from Musashi to Bruce Lee said the same thing, like all these great martial arts masters, right? That the ultimate expression of skill is not having to have the fight. And Sun Tzu talked about it with warfare, like on a larger scale. The ultimate expression of skill at warfare is to have the war not actually really kick off. Whether
it's a principle that's not shared, and I don't know why. It seems so simple for a man like you, who can speak about it with a lot of ease and alacrity. There are other people who seem to have a terrible time wrapping their head around it. And it's been my experience that those people are wrapped up in some misplaced fear or anxiety about leaning into the experience of it. And Herodotus wrote it. He wrote, "Force in 425 BC. Force has no place where there is need of skill." And It was actually Mike Pannone who threw that phrase around constantly for years. I mean, from the days of Left Eye Consulting to today. And that couldn't be more true of verbal de-escalation, that people will resort to control and physical intervention because they don't know what to do. And if they had the skill, they might not have done that. They might not have resorted to hands-on.
So I'm going to give kind of part confession, part exposition on this one, right? So when I was a younger man, I sought out dangerous situations.
Oh yeah.
I sought them out, right? Like I said, my hero was Musashi. Like I was looking for the 60 duels and the 5 wars that he had. You know what I mean? But now that I'm older, I am probably more proud of how many times I didn't have to put my hands on someone or didn't have to use a gun than I am of the times that I did, because it meant that I was able to control the situation before it got to that point.
That's real power. That's real power.
And it's not always up to you, obviously. I mean, the other guy has a vote. Right. Sometimes you just can't do it. But I can think of so many times in both careers, both, in special forces and on the police department, where the ability to talk to people mattered more than the ability to pull a trigger.
Yeah.
Both in the moment and in a strategic sense for your long-term goals, what you're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
Usually you accomplish more by not pulling the trigger if you can. Obviously, you don't always have that luxury. Sometimes you're not given a choice.
Here's a phenomena that's worth mentioning. It's a fundamental component of any meaningful training in this work, in what I do, to embody an affect of self-regulation, to project and model, even neurobiologically, that you are in control of your emotional arousal and emotional state. That neurobiologically influences other people who aren't. Tony refers to it as calm is contagious.
Yes.
And that speaks to a neurobiological principle that's anchored in mirror neurons. But when it comes to the special operations community, all of you, generally speaking, are so well versed in the extremes of force use that the way that most of you, and I've met a lot of people in special operations since 2001, all of you project a quiet confidence that makes it through to someone when they're feeling stress or dysregulation. It makes it through. You're unafraid about whatever extremity the situation could go to because you've prepared and trained for that. So it's natural as a result to show the virtue of restraint. It's a virtue at that point because you have the capacity to do these very destructive things. But what is nonverbal is that your willingness to avoid that and try something that leads someone to collaboration. That's extraordinary power. And sadly, we've lost in the behavioral health and in the clinical and healthcare space the value of that kind of training, the value of in the learning environment, someone has been conditioned to operate under extreme circumstances so that in less extreme circumstances, you're seeing that quality in the responder. And instead, we have caregivers that get wigged out really quick over the use of profanity. We have family caseworkers becoming dysregulated because a kid in a family, in an at-risk family, engages in some kind of disrespectful behavior. And then we have adults unwinding when their job is to stay together and lead this person who's unwinding to a more regulated state. We've lost the value of that kind of training, I think, Matt.
Well, and I think there's a couple things there too, right? Like I think there's an ego component. I think that people, and I've had some pretty heated conversations about the value or lack thereof of ego in violent professions and in training for them.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's misunderstood. You need the confidence and the pride. What you don't need and what is absolutely detrimental to performance, all performance, not just what we're talking about, but the pulling the trigger part too, is an attachment to wanting to appear a certain way.
Oh, yes.
People have to see me as this. And then you start doing these things that are actually detrimental to what you're trying to accomplish so that people will see you a certain way so that you can die on that hill.
Couldn't agree more. In the psychology context, we would actually refer to that as persona, the mask. What mask are you showing to the world? And it was knowing, in New Jersey, where I grew up, particularly in some of the urban sections.
I never would have guessed from the accent.
Yeah. You always, I'll share something with you. I could share it on this podcast with you, Matt, because you'll appreciate this. I had the good fortune of working at a archery pro shop in Indoor Lanes that was owned by not only a Pope and Young bow hunter, but he was the master coach to the Olympic coaches of 4 countries. And if anything brings together people from the FBI, accountants, and organized crime people, is bow hunting. So in this place, you had FBI agents, police officers, bow hunters, plumbers, everybody coming together about bows and arrows. And there were always some of the organized crime guys. I saw in them a quality of how they engaged the world that I appreciated. In every conversation, on the phone with their kids, in the archery lanes with other shooters, outside and around the corner at the pizzeria, they were the same person all the time. You didn't see different people. And their persona was very consistent. I mean, I didn't see many of them at home, but I saw extraordinary consistency in how they engaged the world. And I said to myself back then when I saw it, God, that's got to be so much more reasonable and relieving to live that way than someone who has to constantly produce an image that they want other people to see about them.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of effort, man.
It takes a lot of effort, and it's ultimately, I believe, counterproductive in pretty much every sense. Like, I don't think there's any way where it truly benefits you in
I
the long
couldn't agree
term.
more.
In
Couldn't agree
the
more.
short term, maybe, but in the long term, I think it's detrimental.
Yeah.
So I have a funny. It's not archery, but so Taylor Street in Chicago is part of one of the little Italies. There's a couple little Italies in Chicago, right? And it's gotten very gentrified. Even this is going back some time now, because I've been gone for a while, and this was years before I retired. But
Sure.
even back at this point, it had become very gentrified, right? You know, a lot of university kids at the colleges by there, a lot of medical people at the medical district right by there. But it still had that kind of like Little Italy flair to it, right? There was a cigar shop on Taylor Street, and the vast majority of the customers in the cigar shop were either law enforcement or organized crime.
Yeah.
And we would go in and we would sit. The outfit guys sat on the east side of the room, and the coppers sat on the west side of the room.
Yes.
And we would talk smack at each other across the room.
Yeah.
We wouldn't sit with each other.
Right.
We weren't like,
but you break one another's balls.
We weren't unfriendly either, you know? And I am so glad that I am old enough, because I don't think experiences like that exist anymore.
No.
I think that society has gotten rid of that. And I'm not saying that it's okay to be a vicious organized crime boss. That's not what I mean. But there was a certain legitimacy. I would much prefer dealing with them over dealing with disorganized crime. Let's just put it that way.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's some code. There's some ethic. You don't have to.
We could talk to each other. Like,
yes.
we were on opposite sides of the professional conflict, but it was professional. It was just business. We could talk to each other.
Right. Precisely. I couldn't agree more. And I think you're also right in that today, whether it's due to ideological possession or polarization or the advent of how the worldview of people has changed due to technology, I would agree in principle with the claim that those days are long gone. It's a different world today. And in no small part, particularly in the youth and family services sector, Matt, we're having extraordinary challenges with how technology plays into the lives of youth and the number of ways it can influence very challenging behaviors to have to deal with. We're dealing with extraordinary frequency of self-harm and cutting. We're dealing with extraordinary risk-taking as a merit system for followers. We're dealing with the use of personal suffering to instrumentalize and influence what other people say and think to us. And I thank God that I saw the writing on the wall some years ago in raising my own daughters. And I feel very grateful and proud of the fact that I have raised girls that do not engage in the proliferation of strange and unusual behaviors to get your needs met in today's world by young people. It's alarming what we're dealing with in youth and family services today and juvenile justice.
So even someone my age, I see the effects.
Oh,
so like here's an example, because I've always been a voracious reader. Like, I love to read. I love to learn. I love to read. 15, 20 years ago, I could sit down and read a book cover to cover. Yeah. Like, say I didn't have anything going on for the day, or I wasn't feeling well, or, I had to rest up for some reason, whatever. I could sit on the couch, put on some background music, and devour a book, a 300-page book, easily.
Yep.
I have to read things in chunks now.
I know
because my attention span has been sliced up.
Yep.
By that quick and like everything else, there's some good to it too. Like there's so much information available. Like you can, if you know how to sift through and get the wheat from the chaff, there's so much good information you can get quicker and easier than ever before. That's the plus. The negative is what it's done to, I think, our critical thinking ability. It's done bad things to our attention spans. It's
awful.
And it's going to get worse with AI, I think. I saw a study about AI where they said that it's got hugely deleterious effects to cognitive processes.
You're completely right. You know who Dave Grossman is, right? Lieutenant
Of
Colonel
course.
Dave Grossman?
Yeah.
Okay. So Tony and I just spoke with him about 2 weeks ago, and on a podcast that we do. And Tony's known Dave for 30 years, and I've been following Dave for at least 20, and had some opportunities to green room talk with him before our episode. And I look forward to more conversations with him. His work today, like 30 years ago, you probably remember, he used to be on network television talking about the deleterious effects of video games and boys. That was like on Fox News, CNN back then. So today, he's holding up the research on that technology, sleep deprivation, and youth, and says that we have, based on his review of the data, we have a sleep epidemic. It's like a sleeplessness epidemic among youth because of the damn technology. It influences the dopaminergic system. It influences the other areas that you referred to, the ability to engage in, diversity of thought and expression and cognition. We have big problems. I almost wonder, and I would ask you this question, Matt, what are you hearing from your younger counterparts that are still in about the youth coming into special operations today, the young men?
So this is something that makes me feel good, actually.
Okay.
It's actually a positive.
Okay.
The general thing I'm getting is that they're having more problems getting the same percentages of people that can pass it. But the people that do pass are the best they've ever seen.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I've met some kids. Some kids have come through my training classes that have just graduated the Q course, just randomly.
Right.
Like at the primary and secondary summit in Utah, and one of my classes through the TTPOA, the SWAT organization here in Texas.
Right.
So I've met these kids that are like, the brand new versions of what I was, and they're studs, man. They are smart, sharp, driven, athletic. I wish I had their athletic ability. And I think part of that is the trap that you're talking about is there. But the kids that escape that trap and manage to harness the information that's available now know so much more about training, fitness, psychology, like all those things that I had to really devour 15 books to get 2 nuggets of knowledge. Now they get twice as much knowledge on 15 minutes of YouTube.
Right.
They go to a Huberman podcast and they've got more information than it took me weeks to get.
Exactly right. Exactly right. You said what I was thinking differently after you said, I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing. You're getting the kids that escape that. Because there has to be a sampling in that group. There has to be a sample in that cohort that's not resonating, however small it may be, not resonating with what's transforming kids through technology today. And I'm not surprised that they're finding their way into special operations and producing, very desirable attributes.
Well, and I think I have another theory on this too. And, I by no means have your background. So I'm very curious to see what you would think about this. So every generation rebels. Well, what does rebellion look like for a young man now? It looks like athletics. It looks like service to country. It looks like kind of the self-reliant libertarian political process that I would personally espouse to if I had to tell somebody what I thought, right?
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. The things that were far more common among young men and collectivist are now indeed the markers of rebellion. Today, we have the highest numbers of disaffected young men that we've ever seen. The dating scene for young men
Oh,
and relationships with kids has been for, the early teenage romantic relationship patterns with kids today, at least in my observation, is terribly concerning than it was 20 years ago. Um, and I've, as a parent, I've navigated some of that as my kids went through junior high and high school not that long ago, and I think you're on to something with this observation. I would absolutely agree that wellness, fitness, self-control, finding hard things to do, achievement,
yeah.
mastery, that's
Critical
all rebellion
thinking.
culture now.
Yeah. Stoicism, critical thinking.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That you're not an automaton of of ideological possession. I don't know if I live in a part of the country where there is a lot of political activity, with um, small rallies, protests. I live in the I-5 corridor. I live on an island in the Puget Sound called Anderson Island, but I'm in Tacoma, Seattle all the time. And it's been my direct and Olympia, where we have extraordinary amounts of um, people living with homelessness, substance misuse, and I'm in the housing initiatives associated with that because we have workforce members that are constantly exposed to higher risk conditions, so they come to us for training in verbal de-escalation. When you have a house full of people that are on Section 8 housing that are actively burning fentanyl and meth, with the ecology of that in the buildings, the workforce needs support. So I'm there to do that. It's been my observation that most of the talking points and activity around the rallies and protests, when you push on that to get to the depth of their belief or argument, it's not there. They want to evade and get out of there. They want the ability to make the talking points, but if you press them on matters that, let's say, that would put them in touch with their own verbal IQ or their ability to articulate their why, they're not comfortable doing that, and they instead disengage or become violent, one or the other.
What are the root causes of that, do you think? Do you think
Yeah,
it's just simply a question of I want to appear a certain way for, validation, for kind
I
of social points?
I think that disaffected people find each other through ideological bonding. It's the same phenomena that you see um, in the pipeline and revolving door of the juvenile justice system back to the gangs. I think that ideological possession unify disaffected people with shared purpose. I don't think that they engage in extensive research of the idea to see if they truly believe in it, because there is lower hanging fruit that they get: loyalty, togetherness, camaraderie. In the same way, a kid who gets out of juvenile justice eventually finds his way back into gang life because there's unified purpose, camaraderie, loyalty. I had a juvenile justice shift lieutenant tell me once, some of the most structured parenting that these kids ever get are when they're on our units. The most structured parenting they get is when they're here in the facility. And so what does that say about um, the strength of the family out in community, to the extent that the staff of the facility, and I'm in the largest juvenile justice facility in the nation at the JTDC in Chicago. You've probably seen the place. It's right near the FBI building.
Yep.
It's a giant integrated facility.
I've been there many times.
Yeah, probably dropping kids off. So that place is filled with people that are trying to break the pipeline of kids going back to gang life. I think in the domain of political ideological possession, I think young people find one another and create community and get a sense that they're heard without a lot of scrutiny placed on that. And I think it's the togetherness of that that drives them to their next purposeful activity, which might be, some kind of rally or protest or public disruption. We're seeing it everywhere here. Seattle through Portland. It's a complete shit show.
Well, we're tribal by nature, I think. And we like to. I read a great quote in a book the other day, and I can't remember the title of the book, but it's we like to say that we are descended from great apes, when the actual truth is we are great apes. We are a primate. No, I mean, we are. We're like scientifically, zoologically, whatever, I don't know, biologically, whatever phrase you want to use, we are one of the great apes, right up there with chimpanzees and orangutans and gorillas. And that's not a negative. Like, it's not a criticism of the human race. It's a reality. We like to think of ourselves as different and distinct than animals and nature, when really we just happen to be a little smarter and wear clothes. You could argue about the smarter part.
We've learned so much about anger scientifically by studying primates. We learned in the, I don't know if you've ever heard of the research that was done on chimpanzees regarding blocking a goal or violating an expectation, but I'll quickly tell you the experiment that we did to learn about the core motivations to anger. Chimps love cucumbers. They love grapes even more. So if you were to place two chimpanzees in two enclosures next to each other, and if you were to train them to hit a prompt for a researcher to hand them a piece of fruit, it's the chimp will do this every time they want something and the researcher responds. So the control experiment was the chimp would hit the prompt and would be given a cucumber. And now the other chimp in the other enclosure, who can see that chimp, hits the prompt because he saw that one got a piece of cucumber. And the researcher comes over and gives him a grape. So he's eating the grape. Now this chimp sees that he just got a grape, puts the cucumber down, hits the prompt. Researcher comes over, gives him a cucumber. He looks at it. He wants another grape. He hits the prompt. He gets one. This chimp gets pissed off, hits the prompt again. Researcher comes over, gives him a cucumber, throws it at the researcher, hits the prompt again, gets another cucumber, grabs the cage and goes, ah! We can do that. We can repeat that over and over and over. And the research objective, which was to identify the core motivation of anger, was described as, if a goal is blocked, if you conceptualize a goal, I want to get to the grape, it's blocked. Or another way of articulating that is, if you violate an expectation, I have an expectation to get that grape, and you just violated it with giving me this cucumber. Those are core motivations to anger. We've done so many variations on anger research with monkeys. We've learned more in the last 25 years about the neurobiology of anger through studying the behavior of primates than we ever have before. So to your primate, illustration, there's meaningfulness in what we've learned about human behavior from that species.
And
I'm not saying that I think we came from apes. I'm just saying we've learned a lot from it.
Well, I think, and I'm not going to get into an evolution discussion right now, but so like I recognize the things you just said about that study in human behavior. in the human behavior I've observed
Of course.
in third world countries, in the ghetto, in boardrooms, and in the offices with the brass and politicians.
Of
Right?
course.
It's everywhere, because we're not. Yes, we are different, but where we are different is that we have enough cognitive ability to manifest control over it. And I'm not saying that you couldn't teach another primate to do that. You probably could, but I don't know if
Yes.
anybody's ever tried. But I think that's where things like Stoicism and Zen and the classical education come into play. I think that's
couldn't
where
agree
things
more.
like, and that's like, that should be in our higher education, and it's just lacking now. Like that's where you get critical thinking and self-control, is that if we didn't read the classics to read the classics, we read the classics to learn about human nature and how to exert control over our own natures.
Ryan Holiday invented a whole career around repackaging Stoicism.
And he did a great job too.
He sure did. And he came at a time where those lessons were needed more than ever. Like, I don't think I give out Marcus Aurelius's meditations 8-9 times a year. I if I'm in a conversation with someone and I get a sense that they would get some value out of that book, I immediately order it for them on Amazon and have it sent to them right away. That book irrevocably altered my thinking. And the on its face, the propositions of Stoicism are undesirable today, for whatever reason, and to many, but they are an oasis for people who are dissatisfied with society and interpersonal culture today. They're an oasis for them, because that's where the real answer is. You know, we've long contended, if you can, and this has been the message of Gary Nesner, who was the founder of the FBI's Crisis Negotiation Unit, lead negotiator at Waco, and he's a dear friend of mine, for years. If you can influence someone and they're not even aware that you're doing it, but it's leading them to something better, that's real power. It's real power to be able to not, I'll put it this way, Matt, and I'm sure you've seen it as a training officer. How often have you seen police officers need to articulate to the subject that they're in control of the situation? We're in control here, or something along those lines, as if that verbal statement is doing something to affect control rather than express the insecurity of the person who feels like they need to say it because they're losing control of it.
I've never seen that statement do anything but have the negative response.
That's precisely right. And that's what happens everywhere it's tried. We help students reframe what real power and influence is when they can lead someone therapeutically to regulate themselves. Now, that always takes longer to do than control someone. It means that you're going to be exposed to discomfort longer than perhaps the higher intensity, lower duration of some kind of physical containment. But when you lead someone, very often, what could be the first time in someone's life when someone has had when a responder has taken the time to help lead someone to a self-regulated state, you actually make the world a better place, because you show another human being what's possible when they thought that it wasn't possible.
I would kind of argue too, just from my own experience, and I want to hear what you think about this, that way of framing things, that way of looking at things, that way of trying to influence a situation interpersonally with another person, is not just for crisis management. It's for leadership. It's for interpersonal relationships. It's for everything we do with other human beings.
Matt, this is why negotiation training is now in HR departments, boardrooms, in matters of foreign policy, these principles, you not only are you nailing it, you're splitting the arrow like in Huygen Herrigel's Zen and the Art of Archery. Um, what you're describing is helps parenting, helps foreign policy, helps labor and management negotiations. It can be applied to any area of life.
And even things like as an instructor, right? I've had the good fortune of having people come up to me months or years after I've taught them something and articulate to me an impact I had on their development that I didn't realize I had.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that to say I'm that great.
No,
I
know what you're
the
talking
reality
about, and it feels wonderful when you
there was like a kid in the ghetto in Chicago. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to embarrass him, who was a police explorer scout. And he was always talking to me when I was a sergeant on SWAT.
Yeah.
And honestly, there were times where it was an effort for me to give the time to him I felt he deserved, but I made the effort. That kid is now on SWAT.
How about that? How about that? Hey, by the way, you got to tell me, you missed the Portillo sandwiches.
Oh, they've got Portillo's in Texas now, my friend.
They do? Okay.
Yep. Matter of fact, every time I go to Dallas, if I don't come home with Portillo's, my wife Angela, I'll be sleeping on the couch. I have to get Portillo's. We also get deep dish pizza shipped in periodically.
Me too. And the best one so far, Scott Tillema, who's a SWAT negotiator from the Schaumburg area, and went to the FBI Academy. Great guy. He's very active in the corporate world now with negotiation training. We eat pizza every time I go visit him. He just sent me 6 Lou Malnati's.
That's the ones we get. We get Lou Malnati's.
They are the best. The best.
And they come in the styrofoam with the fucking freezer packs.
Yes,
and
in a giant box, and it starts oozing after you leave it next to your garbage for a day, Yes, I Lou Malnati's frozen pizza shipped is the best of all of them. And I've had Geno's, I've had Giordano's, I've had Pequod's. Lou Malnati's frozen pizza reheated in Washington has been the best.
They do ship the best out of all of them. They do. So we call those our emergency pizzas.
Yes.
So that night when you don't feel like cooking and you don't want to order out.
Yeah. Where in Texas are you?
I am just south of Austin. I'm in a town called Lockhart. It is by state decree the barbecue capital of Texas.
Okay. I remember having Texas barbecue for the first time when years ago I had to fly into Austin, and I was so struck by live music in the airport, and I went to that night a Rudy's. Is that a popular barbecue place there in Austin?
Yeah. Next time you make it down, we'll have to take you to Terry Black's.
Okay.
So there's this family in Lockhart, and I don't know all the particulars. I've only been in Lockhart, less than a year. But apparently they did like a documentary TV series on the conflict between the barbecue family and Lockhart, because it all started out as one restaurant, and now there's like 6 different restaurants.
Okay.
And it's like an organized crime story. Like they're in conflict and they hate each other. And
yes. There's a German psychologist friend of mine who has a special practice. I did not know this, and it was Gary Nesner who put us together. His practice, apparently in Europe, big companies are owned by families, and these families know each other, and there very often is inward-facing conflict within the family, and then there's also conflict, as you just described, between families.
Well, it's almost feudal.
Yes. His practice is to engage in conflict mediation and resolution with these corporate families. That's inward facing, and he will also go back and forth to mediate conflict between families. I was blown away when he told me that was his practice. And when he began to name the companies and describe the kinds of things that he's mediating, you wouldn't believe in the lives of these multi-million dollar families, the same kinds of issues that we grew up with that are playing out at such magnitude because of the money at that scale.
Well, that goes back to the whole Zen and Stoicism angle, right? Like it's
Yeah.
it's the attachment that causes the suffering.
That's
It's
precisely right. And,
I'm
and
not
look at
I'm
all
not
the family
saying
dynamics, kids trying to aspire to the worthiness of the patriarch or the parent. And just think of that successful TV series Succession with Brian Cox. I mean, that captured the hearts and minds of millions of people because of the family dynamic of him raising kids within the context of their enterprise and everyone trying to individuate and establish themselves and get dad's approval when dad's a maniac to begin with, and the drama that would play out just in that TV show. So, you know, you're onto it, Matt. These things that we cherish in crisis de-escalation: self-regulation, um, projecting self-control, leading someone, notwithstanding whatever they're doing that's disrespectful or irritating, leading them while they're presenting this way without any impact on us to a state of self-regulation. Look, Musashi talked about this in The Garden. It's my favorite anecdote from the book. He's in the garden with his friends sitting Zen. You know it as well as I do. The snake comes along as they're both sitting, slides over his friend as if, and his friend, as if he's not even, it doesn't disrupt him. The snake doesn't pay attention to him, goes to Musashi, looks at Musashi, says, "Holy shit," because Musashi is so menacing, and takes off. And Musashi looks to his friend. He says, "Did you see that? Did you see what just happened?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "If a snake does that to me, how can I have relationship with anybody? How can I be in the world and have relationship with anybody if that's what happens?"
so
So please.
no. So there's something about this that I really like because my hero when I was a teenager was Musashi,
Yeah.
which was very unusual for how I grew up.
Yep.
My age of growing up, right? And he started out. He didn't start out as a good person. Now, a lot of this historically, you don't really know for sure what the entire truth is historically, but there are some
Right.
things that are not in dispute. He beat a grown man to death with a tree limb at the age of 13 and called it a duel.
Yep.
Like that's straight up headed to sociopathy right there. That is not a good start to your existence, right?
Right.
But by the time he died in his 60s, he was an artist and a sculptor and a
Yeah.
poet.
Yeah.
And the thing that I found the most interesting about it is that they talk about his swordsmanship, like different historical accounts, people that actually were there.
Yeah.
And when he was fighting the duels, he was a brute. He was just a brute. He was bigger than everybody else. He was very aggressive, almost savage, right? And then when he was teaching people in his 50s, they said that they'd never seen someone look that placid and calm in the middle of a fight.
Yeah.
Because he'd figured it out, right? He realized that where he was headed was not where he wanted to be.
Yeah.
And he's still famous centuries later, but he paid a pretty big price for the life he led.
Oh, I'd say so. Matt, I love what you're laying down here. I love it. I think so many of us are on a journey of ongoing transformation, and to resist the transformation is to almost indulge suffering. I lived in during the course of my career that African proverb: to go fast, go alone; to go far, go together. And there was a period of time where I was charged with, I'll say it this way here. Um, I was charged by the executive team of a large hospital to get the human rights violations to stop, which means that I had to get in between licensed psychiatrists and nurses and a psychiatric patient, where they would order seclusion or restraint for things that did not meet the criteria to do that. And the way that they structured me and my program was outside of the clinical chain of command, so they did not have influence over us. So I was very mission focused, and I did not seek collaboration. I got between the decision and the person it was going to influence to facilitate a different outcome. I did that in a very laser focused manner without really giving a shit about what they thought about it. And we were able to bring the use of seclusion and restraint in the management of people to almost negligible levels instantly. Here was the price for that. I was hated. The safety improvements that resulted, which meant fewer patient to staff assaults with injury, were not important to them. What was important to them was I interfered with their judgment. I interfered with their practice. They may have experienced me as removing dignity from them. And that did not last long before one of my mentors to this day came to me and said, Andy, I can't have gang fights with labor about you anymore. We got to move you out of there, because I had become the lightning rod for getting in between these decisions and the human beings they were impacting. I wouldn't change a thing. But what I learned with going fast was that not one person came along with me on this enterprise of trying to make the place safer for staff and people served. It takes a lot longer to get people to come along together, which means you have to tolerate the unnecessariness of bad decisions. You know, and I'm sure you saw that in the course of your experience in war. I mean, the unnecessariness. You could fix something right now, but you knew that if you fixed it right now, it would not result in lasting change.
One of the greatest lessons I learned from the Q course, from the process, the pipeline of becoming a Green Beret, right, was the necessity of getting buy-in from people.
Yep.
And getting buy-in from people that you might not truly respect.
Yep.
I'm not saying you won't. You might not. It depends on who your indigenous people are, like,
Yep.
and who you get. You know, if you get some squared away commandos that are solid and work really hard, that's fantastic. And you might get the guys that smoke hash between their guard shifts and can't remember their names.
Yeah.
And you don't have a choice as to who you get. Like, you're going to get who you're going to get.
Right.
And the thing is that either one of those, you still have to get buy-in, or you can't get the mission done.
Yeah.
And that was such a hard lesson for me as a younger man. It was so difficult for me because I had the arrogance of youth, and I had achieved a certain measure of objective success, right?
Yep.
And accomplishment. So I became comfortably arrogant about certain things.
Yes.
And the older I got, the more I realized that doesn't do you any good at all. It's counterproductive.
I couldn't agree with you more. This kind of meaningful discussion is exactly where I have found great value in sharing these kinds of principles in a community of workforce that generally is not associated with the lessons of the armed services. The people that special operations produces, and the kinds of people it attracts, are so thoughtful and so humble in their willingness to share their learning and their journey with other people that I cherish conversations like this, Matt, because I've long contended that if these principles of negotiation are what we do under life and death circumstances, when someone's got a detonator or the muzzle of a rifle pointed at them, or some other, terrible, terrible situation, if we are self-controlled and trying to lead someone to collaboration in life or death circumstances, why are we so quick to abandon that in less than life or death circumstances? Why do we grab the controller out of the kid's hand and say, go do your fucking homework or I'm going to smash this with a ball peen hammer, instead of, hey, Johnny, I see you're playing Xbox. I like Xbox too. The rules in our home are you got to knock your homework out before you enjoy a leisure activity. How about you go knock your homework out? That way you can come back and finish the video game. Well, Andy, that takes too long to say. It's a lot easier to just take the controller. Well, you can control that. Yeah, you can get the kid to go do their homework that way. But are you engendering any appreciation for the house rules and the homework by doing it that way? When you do it with coercion or fear, you're not inculcating the same virtues as you are when you do it by collaboration.
And you want, at least I did, you want your son to value those things. You want him to value the importance of doing what needs to be done first and then enjoying yourself.
Right. Right. And that's just one example of countless. The way that we would manage someone living with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, and they have been charged with murder, but we need to rule out if mental illness was part of the crime. They would come to the acute care admissions unit, and the court order would require competency restoration, which means that we have to administer medication. And they are convinced that there are nanobots in that medication and that they are going to wipe the floor with anyone's ass who comes over to try to give it to them. And many of these people are in the same unit together. So we have a unit of 30 people, all with schizoaffective or schizophrenia, all with some version of antisocial personality disorder, all here for a serious felony. And now we have to rule out if mental illness was part of the crime or not. So we have to evaluate competency. We have to restore competency. Sometimes they would come with court orders to medicate, which means that if they don't do it willingly, we have to do it, which means that we have to hold them down while they're fighting, while someone's coming over with a syringe and hitting them with an IM. And we wanted to avoid, our injury claims in our state 2 years ago for patient to staff assault with injury in our behavioral health administration alone was $14 million. $8 million of it was head and neck. So this is not like this just happens once in a while. This happens constantly. So, of course, I'm going to want to lead someone to want to take their medication without threatening coercion. The way that would look in that setting is like this, Matt. Hey, look, Roger, you've made absolutely clear you don't want to take the medication, that you want to fight, and we get it loud and clear. There's a court order requiring the administration of this medication. How about we sit down with the doctor and maybe you could talk a little bit about why you don't want to take it and what you may be willing to take. That way we can put in the progress notes that you're cooperating with us, and it'll help you get out of here. And in the middle of that, he's resisting, fuck this kangaroo court. He's saying all these things. We're waiting for that to end. And then we start up again with validation and we lead them through a process of thinking. And eventually we get to one of two places. They're either doing what we want them to do and they didn't even know we let him to do it, or he's doing it begrudgingly, but it's not a fight anymore. And yeah, it takes longer to get to, but that person remembers the goodwill that you invested in them while they were resisting this, and you were trying to find something in there where that person could exercise their own agency, their own choice.
And there's a lesson there for law enforcement that used to be common knowledge among good street cops. And I don't think it is to the same degree anymore. And that's not the policeman's fault. It's the fault of how they're managed now and the change in the social contract and just the amount of scrutiny that they're under. right?
Yeah.
But it used to be something that every good beat cop knew, is that you didn't solve crimes by getting out there and busting heads. Don't get me wrong, the good beat cops of 30 years ago weren't shy about busting heads when that was what it took.
Right.
But that's not how you solve the crime. You do that because you don't have a choice. You solve the crimes and you prevent the crimes with people that are willing to talk to you. And they're willing to talk to you because you gave them some measure of dignity.
Yes. The Norman Rockwell painting of the police officer and the kid at the soda shop together. I have always loved that painting. That's precisely how communities work well together. When people who are charged with enforcement responsibilities engage in relationship with community, which clearly you understand.
Yeah, and it's like so many other things. They've tried to, and they is rather nebulous here, but the social contract has changed, like I said. And the intent, at least the intent that was stated, was to eliminate excessive force, was to eliminate, prejudice and lack of equal application of things.
Yep.
Right. But that's not really what they got. What they got was they took away the discretion on the part of the policeman, and that actually negatively impacted the very populations they thought they were going to protect.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And when you don't have centralized command and decentralized execution, when you have centralized command and centralized execution, that's what you get. You get police officers who are disempowered, firefighters and EMTs who are disempowered because the politics of the agency are driving practice. I couldn't agree more, Matt. Who knew we would go down these rabbit holes together today, man?
I'm pretty good at finding rabbit holes. It seems to be my hobby. So no, I think the main reason I do this podcast is because I get to have interesting conversations with people that I would enjoy talking to regardless.
Yep.
So
yep.
So I have a question for you before we wrap things up. What advice would you give either the young soldier or young policeman, or the young man who's interested in being kind of self-reliant and able to take care of himself and his loved ones and defend himself? What advice would you give them and how to seek out kind of the knowledge we're talking about on their own? Like, what are some good resources for them to kind of at least get a baseline understanding of what they're trying to learn how to do?
Yeah. Let's start with the reading list. I think that it would be meaningful for them to dive into books like Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who was an Auschwitz survivor, of course. Stephen Pressfield's Gates of Fire, and particularly the way that Stephen describes the distinction between the natural courage of Anthony and the learned, trained courage of Dionychus, where the vast majority of people have to live through suffering in order to gain confidence and self-control, and that in the Spartans became a method. Very unusual. Tony Blauer calls them the unicorn. There's a unicorn every once in a while of someone who does not allow fear to interfere with their decision making. Most other people have to manage the startle flinch impulse. The next book, of course, is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Thoughts in Solitude by Thomas Merton, if you're faith-oriented. I think those kinds of books will open the door on the principles of self-regulation and self-governance. And the reason that that's valuable is because we are in a world that suggests that the problem in the external world is the reason for your dysregulation. And the first order of business in any meaningful de-escalation training is that de-escalation is not problem solving. De-escalation is not fixing the thing in the external world in order for the person to be okay. We help people with their self-regulation problem, and then we'll offer support to help them manage the problem that's in the world. The next piece of advice would be to lean into exercises of any type. If you're afraid of heights, if you're afraid of water, identify the things that cause you fear and acquire knowledge by leaning into discomfort to overcome the fear. When I was afraid of water, I went to rescue swimmer school. When I was afraid of heights, I went to rope rescue school. I deliberately, like you did as a young man, Matt, I was interested in overcoming the things I was afraid of in order to not live with the discomfort of fear anymore. And what I learned is that knowledge and self-mastery is empowering and reduces or eliminates, in some circumstances, fear. So the advice for young people that I would have is the answers are within you. And the more that you can regulate yourself and say what you need to say, whatever that is, in a non-offensive way and live with no regret, the more you make the world a better place.
I would, if I could add to that,
Please.
I would add that in my opinion, people debate, philosophers, everyone debates over the meaning of life, right? Theologians, everybody.
Yeah.
I think at least a big component of a meaningful life is self-mastery. Like that's
Unequivocally, and knowing what that means, really being clear about what that means. It means that I do not allow impulse to drive whatever it is I do. And that does not mean that doing things quick is impulsive. It just means that impulse doesn't drive what I say or do.
yeah, just like
yeah.
sorry, just like self-mastery doesn't mean you're superhuman. It doesn't mean you never get mad. It doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. It just means that you don't allow those parts of your physiology and psychology to rule. You rule them instead of allowing them to rule you.
Precisely right. And when you were vulnerable or made an oversight. You know when you made a mistake, as opposed to justifying the mistake. I think one of the big challenges we're dealing with now in human beings is the entitlement that people have in thinking that their anger and their expression of it, even when it damages other people, is justified. Like we seem to have among youth an entitlement crisis that their claims of their suffering, they are entitled to dominate this moment in time, whatever it is, to articulate ad nauseum their suffering and consume other people's attention and time and regulate how they respond because I am entitled to my anger and suffering. It's a terrible thing to have to manage someone in relationship who feels entitled to their anger for more than the nervous system would generally allow it. When it becomes a patterned behavior of regulating the world.
Well, and not to disparage the psychological profession, but this is more a co-opting of it than anything else by popular culture. It's not really the psychology of it. But that whole, I've been triggered, this triggers me, I need a trigger warning. Life is going to trigger you. Life doesn't care what your feelings are.
Matt, we got big human resources problems now in human services. I'm not joking. We got big problems where workforce members who are of that mindset are making those claims about personal trauma over what is the bread and butter of the work of the organization. Let's say it's providing case management for youth and families. And let's say a particular family presents some challenges. Let's say they present some emotional arousal and how they talk or engage with the caseworker. And the caseworker begins to report trauma to the workforce and invoke an EAP referral, a need for counseling when the event itself generally doesn't even meet the published criteria for an adverse event or a near miss event. We have people claiming, I'm triggered, I've been traumatized by things that 20 years ago no one would dream of making that claim about. And this doesn't mean that there isn't some suffering going on in the mind of the person, but are we doing them a service by giving them an EAP packet? And are we doing them a service by letting them take FEMLA for a month because some kid told them to F off?
So going back to the whole we are actually primates thing, I think people miss the boat on this a lot, I think. And I'm probably going to get some hate mail in the comments on this, but that's okay. So as a hobby, my wife trains a couple of working line dogs that we have.
Beautiful.
German Shepherd and a Malinois, right? And there's a lot to training those dogs. They are very high performing dogs, right? People don't like to hear this. They really don't. But on a principle-based level, principle-based, not the application of the principles, but on a principle-based level, there is not that much difference between training those dogs when they were puppies and raising a child or dealing with a young adult, right? Like it's, and that's not diminishing the person at all. That's not demeaning or insulting. It's just we are also governed by biology and psychology and behaviorism, no less than an animal is. We're more sophisticated, perhaps, so it's more difficult to train us, but we require training too. If my parents hadn't trained me right, I would be a worse person than I am.
Yep.
And that's just, you know, that's, we talk about sociological reasons for crime rates in poor neighborhoods. In my opinion, as an untrained person, so much of it has to do with the family. Because I see kids come from the worst neighborhoods.
Yep.
My old partner on the Chicago Police Department was raised in a horrible housing project. Couldn't ask for a better person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he got raised right.
Uh-huh.
He was trained right.
In the project.
Yeah. If you can do it there, you can definitely do it in a good neighborhood. Let me tell you.
I love Chicago, and I love that you're from there. I love that. People do not understand what being a big city cop provides in the context of perspective and worldview. I mean, Chicago, I'm originally from the New York metropolitan area, and I love going to Chicago. I love.
Well, Chicago feels more to me like New York than any other big city. Like they're different. They are different.
Yes.
You know, but differences notwithstanding, they're probably closer than any other large city in the U.S.
Yes. And in as much as that place has problems like any other place, I don't know, some of the smartest people I've ever encountered in human services and in services for kids come from that city. And Chicago, in my opinion, I walked everywhere I wanted to walk in that city unafraid. And I found Chicagoans, generally speaking, some of the most warm and supportive people that I encountered as complete strangers. And I did not experience that in New York at all.
It was a real. So when you watch the old movies set in New York from like the 50s and the 60s, I think that's what it was like in New York then.
Yeah.
When it was still more blue collar, and Chicago's losing it too, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Chicago's not the same anymore either. But I think you need that kind of like that blue collar working class character to a big city to give that feel.
Yes.
You know?
Yep. I think you're onto it there.
And like the first half of my career could have been an 80s action movie or a police procedural novel from the 80s. The only difference was I had to actually do paperwork and write reports. That was the only difference.
Yeah, but with a typewriter probably, right? Did you have a typewriter?
Yes, with a typewriter. Yeah. Yes. And half the people you locked up could write their arrest report for you.
Yep. What a
So like,
pleasure. What a pleasure this has been, Matt. So interesting that a guy who engages the market the way you do, with um, high level force use and application and training, um, would be so adept in these other areas of and interested in these other areas of conversations. Really been, and I've learned so much in this past hour.
I've had a great time too. And I have a theory on that if you want to hear it.
Yeah,
And this, like, you can see this in everything from Machiavelli to Sun Tzu, like we were talking about earlier.
yeah,
My theory is that the people who have an intimate knowledge of real violence understand the necessity of keeping that to only when it's necessary.
yep, yep. I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. In fact, one of the reasons that I enjoy um, bows and arrows and shotguns and precision rifle, and I go to schools for all of that, and I enjoy their craft and the psychomotor skill development. It has enriched my negotiation skill and education immensely, particularly on all that's possible to avoid it. And
Yeah.
uh, 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 not many people are talking about that today in my sector. Um, we're talking about like endless empathy with no rules or boundaries. We're talking about everyone's trauma and getting beyond behaviorism. And there's merits to all of that, but not at the expense of, let's say, the axioms that have come from learning about violence to avoid it are thousands of years old. And uh, I would never trade the experiences and the suffering that I went through in those situations to inform why we engage in de-escalation and crisis intervention today. We do it to make the world a better place and help people help themselves. We don't we don't do it because um, we just want to avoid being violent or using force or using containment. We're trying to avoid their use, and it's because, like I told you earlier, Matt, um, special forces soldiers project. You are the embodiment of the quiet professional, and the quiet professional non-verbally confers the idea that whatever direction you want to take this, you can. I'm ready to go there, but I'm willing to do something that's more supportive than any of those other options. And I really would prefer that if we could, because I know the downstream implications of these other things.
So Zen parable real quick, and then we got to tell everybody how they can get a hold of your business and
Okay.
get stuff with you.
Okay.
So, and I don't remember who originally said the Zen parable, if I even ever knew. No one may know the original author of it, right? But monk and samurai talking, and samurai was a warlord, some daimyo, some feudal warlord, and he asked the monk, "What is the meaning of heaven and hell?" And the monk curses him out and calls him 12 kinds of MF and insults his wife and his children. So the samurai, in a fit of ego-driven rage, draws his sword and raises it overhead to kill the monk. And the monk goes, "That is hell." And the samurai thinks about it, his eyes get wide, and he puts the sword back in the sheath. And the monk goes, "That is heaven."
I couldn't agree more. So the monk allowed experience to relay the principles
Yeah.
by creating conditions at the risk of his own life for someone to get it. That's
Well,
what
I
a
mean,
good negotiator does. That's what a good negotiator does.
I think in the version I read it was supposed to be Taekwon Soho was the monk. I don't know if that's true or not. It could be apocryphal, but
Takawan is quoted at the end of Eugen Herrigel's Zen and the Art of Archery.
yep.
And there's so much there's so much wonderful reading that's out there on these principles. And um, but to answer your original question, to learn more about what we do, my name is Andy Prisco. I'm the founder of Jumpstart Mastery. You can go to jumpstartmastery.org, where you'll see our informational website and all of our asynchronous or live training courses in crisis de-escalation, crisis negotiation. We also have some new courseware coming out on threat assessment and engaging people who are presenting suspicious activity, like protest or rally site screening, or have suspicious backpacks, or are preparing for ambushes. We have some training that will empower workforce members to engage those situations coming out. And then jumpstartmastery.com is our online network, where we have, about 1,000 at this point, public safety and behavioral health and workplace violence prevention professionals from around the world coming together to learn about and discuss these principles. And of course, we're on YouTube and Instagram and on LinkedIn. So, Matt, thank you so much for this opportunity. A super fun discussion, and
No,
hope we
I've
can do it again.
Oh, I'd love to do it again. I've had a great time. I got a feeling we barely scratched the surface.
I think so too.
Yep. So for everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. Definitely, if your management are involved in some career field that needs the resources of Andy and his company, please seek him out, because I think he's got a valuable product. He comes highly recommended by somebody I respect quite a bit. So I see no reason to think that isn't true. And the conversation we had only confirmed it.
Yeah.
So definitely seek him out. Also, the algorithm does not understand my podcast. So please do all those things I need you to do, and click like, subscribe, and all that other stuff. Leave a comment below. All that stuff everybody else says on YouTube, I have to say it too. So there it is.
Yeah.
And I will hopefully talk to everyone again soon. See all you guys next time.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Way is in Training. Please come back again as we explore how training makes us better at our craft and better in our everyday lives. See all of you soon.